Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment. This is episode 89, and today we have back with us our special guest, Josh Spurlock. Josh is the founder of My Counselor Online, which is a clinically based or a clinically informed, faith-based counseling ministry that comes alongside pastors and missionaries and their families to hold up their arms, as they serve, they fight on the front lines. And so, Josh, I love what the Lord has allowed you to do. There's such a synchronization of our missions. We execute that mission a little bit differently from each other, but it's the same heart for leaders and the church. And so glad to have you back. Thanks for being back again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. Like, the reason I'm back again and excited to be back again is just what you said. I feel such an alignment with you in that heart of wanting to come alongside and support ministers and missionaries and leaders within the body. That's what the King has given me passion to do and our team to do. So feels good to be here.
Yeah, we're missing our co-host, Jim Wiegand. Jim is out again today. He'll be back with us with our next podcast, but we miss him. He's a lot of fun, and but he's out taking care of his wife, who just went through some surgery, and we prioritize family, and we want him to take care of his wife, and we know that we can get by without him, but we'll see him. But Jim, we miss you, and we'll see you back on the next pod. Josh, can you give us just a brief summary of what you talked about in Pod 88? Maybe for some who didn't hear Pod 88, now we're into the 89th pod. Can you give us just a brief recap of what we talked about?
If you didn't hear the last one, you should definitely go check it out because we had fun. The point that we begin talking about is recognizing how the experiences of our life shape how we experience the present. And that in the course of life, we can experience things that create wounds for us that get activated or bumped into by present day circumstances that then influence the things that we do and don't do, how we navigate struggles, how we navigate challenging situations in our personal life as well as in our ministry, and how having an understanding of those things can really empower us to be able to navigate the toughest situations at our best.
Yeah. And so we talked through how those wounds impact us. We talked about rejection. We talked about anger and how those things get in the way. We bump in and it it's interesting, right? That it seems to me that these wounds don't get healed accidentally, but that there is concerted, once it comes to our conscious awareness, then there is, and that's really why I want to go with this next question. When it comes to our conscious awareness, then there is, there's action that we need to take and help we need. We're doing this pod assuming that more than a few leaders are carrying wounds from their past.
Yeah, like 100%, myself included, right?
But many times are unaware of those wounds. What are some ways, Josh, that you think leaders could get in touch with some of these wounds and do it in a way that's healthy, that's safe? Can you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. So the starting place for doing exactly what we're talking about is curiosity. It sounds simplistic, but we're not geared to be curious about things that are uncomfortable or things that are painful. That our natural, normal, reflexive action is to try to get away from what's uncomfortable or what's painful.
Yeah.
That's what I do. That's what all of us are kind of inclined to do. We experience pain or we experience something uncomfortable. Knee-jerk response is to get away from that. But by running away from it, we aren't able to understand it.
Right.
So instead, when we feel ourselves pulling that getting away from, running away from, withdrawing, shutting down, pushing back. That can be, an aggressive thing where we kind of fight back, push back, or it can be passive where we withdraw and pull away, fight or flight. But either way, we're moving away from it. We can instead get curious and pause and go, what's this about for me? Well, what is it that I'm feeling? Because our emotions are an informational dashboard that God's wired into our body. Right? Just like the dashboard on your vehicle. The check engine light comes on. You could kind of take a piece of tape and put over the light because it's annoying. Or reach into the dash and try to pull the cords, in order to cut it off, because that's obnoxious. I don't want to see that. But you do so to your own detriment, right? Yeah. Down the road, what maybe could have been addressed easily blows the engine out. That's no good. Instead, what we want to do is pull off to the side of the road, pull out the instruction manual, figure out what's going on, pop the hood. Why is this happening? Right? Curiosity about the situation.
Okay, and I think sometimes you might be able to connect the dots yourself, but what if you can't do that? What should you do? I mean, what would be a next step?
Yeah, the first thing to do is to invite another person into that space with you.
Okay.
Right, which is since the fall, that's been our least favorite thing to do. Right, Adam and Eve, what's the first thing that they did? Right, at fall they hide.
Right,
we've been hiding ever since. Right, that we feel that shame, and our inclination is not to invite someone into that space. It's to hide that space. But there's back to this idea of an embodied spirituality that as opposed to this metaphysical kind of focus of spirituality, it says, all I need is Jesus, which sounds really good, right? But what it does is it divorces Christ from his body. And the reality that Jesus engages us through his body, which is our brothers and sisters in Christ, right? And that conduit of grace and inviting Jesus into that space very often necessarily means inviting part of his body, another person.
It's good.
That space.
Josh, how do you filter that though? Or what, are there credentials that somebody has to have in order to be invited to that space? Should we invite just anybody into that space? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we definitely don't want to invite just anybody into that space, right? That we want to be able to invite folks into that space who are safe and who love us and who are not prone to advice giving, but are able to just be present and make space for us to process out loud and be curious together with us around our experience. That there's a valid place for professional counseling and coaches and spiritual directors, kind of individuals outside of ourselves that have training and experience helping to facilitate that process and experience. But for most folks, you don't need to start there, right? That having a good, safe friend in your life who is comfortable in their own skin and connected with their own experience enough to not get triggered by your vulnerability in a way that causes them to need to shut that down or avoid or give advice to kind of have a quick solution,
right?
Get away from the uncomfortableness of it for them, but that can really set in the hard with you and get curious with you about what's happening and what's going on, that can go a long way for spreading things out on the table and getting enough distance between the oneself and the experience to begin to connect some dots. If you find that you're not able to do that, either A, because you don't have someone like that in your life, which a lot of us are super isolated, like we're around people all day long, but nobody's really close enough to us that we could really be that vulnerable with,
Right.
Or because you do have that person and you're spreading stuff out, but it's not, you're still not getting where you need to get with it. And there may be a place for inviting in a spiritual director or a coach or a counselor to partner with you in that exploration process.
Yeah. 60, I think Barna came out with this stat back in 2017. They studied 14,000 Protestant lead pastors in the United States, and they found out that 66% of them had no deep friendships. Mm. And out of all the negative stats that were in that book, there are a lot of positive things in that book too. That one jumped out at me the most.
Right? Yeah, it's shocking.
Yeah, and so when it comes to wounds, it comes to the things that were done to us when we were younger. There is this isolation factor that I think magnifies it. Like it like thrives in that scenario. And when we bring it into the light, we bring it out of secrecy into the light. I think, and I don't know if this is clinically correct or not, but it just seems to me that thing loses some of its power when I bring it into the light.
Yes, there's a real long neurological explanation for that, but a real simplification of it is, for one thing, when we name an experience, that there's this left-right brain integration that takes place when we're able to, we say, name it to tame it, right? But just by naming it and externalizing it, by identifying it in and of itself, begins to transform and make change to that. But then you add the layer of a relational connection around that, where I'm able to name it with you, John, and allow you to hold that with you, and for you to love me, even in light of this thing that's vulnerable, neutralizes it in a way that's absolutely powerful.
Yeah. So Josh, I know some leaders, that they've kind of started to walk through this process. They've invited somebody who's safe and competent into their life to share this wound or set of wounds. Some of them are even in counseling. But what would you say to a leader who's working on that? They're working hard at getting healed up, but the process seems to be so slow, or it just seems to be dragging on. What would you say to that? How do you address, somebody asks you, why is this taking so long?
It's a complex question, because there's a number of different reasons why that may be the case.
Okay.
One common one that I come across and see is that there's a difference between talking about eating an elephant and eating an elephant, right? Like, we know the word picture of how to eat an elephant one bite at a time, right?
Yeah.
And which is a grueling process, and there's a lot to chew on in order to eat an elephant, right? And so that can take a lot of time. But sometimes we're in a dynamic where we're talking about eating an elephant, we're not actually eating the elephant, right? And talking about eating the elephant doesn't make any progress. Right? You can talk around it forever without any progress being made in eating the elephant. And so sometimes the process in which we're engaging things is talking about our experience without actually experiencing our experience with another in a way that allows us to move through it.
Okay.
And so it doesn't transform the experience that we're having and change it and heal it and bring it in something different. It's more in this kind of detached way that I'm talking about it rather than experiencing through it.
Right.
And so that's a common thing. And because when we truly engage with our experience, which has to do with, from a neurological standpoint, an activating of those wounding experiences that we're carrying around with us and that are influencing us, and then engaging that in a healing process, it changes our body. Like, there's something is different after we do that. Neurologically, the synapses and connections and bindings and firings of our neurons is physiologically different after that experience than before that experience. But if we're just talking about it without actually activating and engaging a process, those things stay the same.
Okay.
So we're going to make sure that we're actually engaging a process that will lead to healing. Otherwise, we can be spinning our wheels and getting more hopeless and discouraged because we're doing something, but that something isn't effective.
Yeah.
It's like taking placebo, right? That you're taking something, but things aren't changing in the situation. So you have to evaluate if that's a possibility.
Right.
Are the things that I'm doing getting results, or is it just going in circles?
Right. I remember when I went through major depression many, many years ago, suicidal depression.
Yeah.
And it felt like it came on all of a sudden, but it had been building for decades.
Yeah.
And finally, we had a couple of precipitating events that just kind of burst the dam, And I remember seeing a counselor, getting my doctor, seeing a counselor. My wife encouraged, not just encouraged, she demanded, that I do that. Thank God for her doing that. And then she put some really wonderful couples in my life that were fun, that knew how to pray. And each one of those couples, at least one of those people had been through what I was going through.
Yes.
And so they were my family, extended family for several months, loved me and prayed with me through that whole recovery process. But I remember, Josh, thinking, this is taking longer than I thought it would. But I realized something, that I didn't get into the spot I was in 3 weeks.
Right.
And there was so many things I felt like I had to unlearn and learn new ways. And so, so we tell clients, look, this is a process that's going to take a while. Now, I think what I've observed is that some people get healed fast, or quicker than others. So but it almost always takes longer than they think it's going to take.
No. I'm an expert in this kind of domain, so I bring a lot of experience, and I can correct that statement for you, John, to say it always takes longer than you want it to. It's always harder and more painful and takes longer than you want it to.
And I just want to encourage our listeners, that I'm sure that there are a lot of folks listening today who are working their way through problems with anxiety, problems with major depression, and you can get to a point where you think, I'm not getting better. This isn't going to. I'll never have a life outside of this. And we want you to know that depression isn't the final chapter in your story. There is life outside of depression. Yes. And so if you are listening today and you're struggling and you're doing the things that Josh has recommended, you've opened yourself up to another person, you're getting professional help, and it just seems like it's incremental. And here's the thing I've also observed, and I know we're getting up against time here, but I think what I see, and in my own experience with depression and recovery, was it never was a straight line up. I would have a good day. Well, actually, I would have a good couple hours.
which is nice break when.
Yeah, and then I would have the rest of the day would be terrible. I might have a good day and then 2 bad days. I might have a good day and a bad day, 2 good days, 2 bad days. And it felt like it was not a straight line of recovery, Josh. It just seemed like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Some days I'd take 2 steps forward. Next day would be a step back. Does that ring true in your experience?
Absolutely. That we want a nice linear direction, that we start here and here, and here's the steps that are going to take place. But it's much more like a bit of a spiral of sorts, right? The kind of circles, but where it circles back to isn't exactly the same place that it was before. It's a little bit further up. and then it cycles, and there is some cyclicalness to it, right? Some up and down, and like I'm
right.
similar again, but it's incrementally moving in a direction that is transformative, or the change is taking place in the situation. Yeah. And then there are other times where there's moments that happen, and it is a breakthrough or a significant kind of move, and it really depends on your situation, who you are, a lot of different variables, right. Which I want to emphasize and underline a little bit, because one of the things that we can get into and that the enemy can use against us is this comparative piece, where we can go, it's my journey versus John's journey versus this other person's journey. And we can have the sense, and the enemy can use shame to go like, what's wrong with you? Here's how John or someone else navigated through that and what their journey looked like, and yours doesn't look like that, and therefore you must be doing something wrong, or something wrong with you. And I just want to encourage you and encourage those who are listening, know that your journey is not someone else's journey, and the variables that are part of your story are not all the same as theirs. And so allow your story and your journey to unfold as the Lord leads you through it, and resist the attacks of the enemy when he kind of comes in and tries to bring shame and condemnation and discouragement through that comparative mechanism.
Yeah. Well, Josh, this has been so wonderful today. Thank you so much for sitting down with me these last 2 weeks and talking through this most important subject. Josh, what is a way that our listeners, if they so desired, could get a hold of your organization or you?
Yeah, you can connect with us through our website at mycounselor.online. We provide counseling services and care through Zoom and through a secure kind of HIPAA compliant Zoom, so that we can connect with you right in your office, right in your home. I meet with a lot of pastors right in their car, and be able to find scheduling that can work around their life, around your life, with myself or one of the others on the team. Or you can track me down on social media at joshspurlock.com, or Talk to Spurlock as kind of a handle that I use out on social media.
Awesome. Well, everyone who is listening today, we want you to know that we love you. We're cheering for you. We're rooting and praying for you. We want you to be healthy. We want you to lead better, lead longer, and have a lot more fun along the way. And I think some of the things that Josh and I have talked about these last 2 podcasts will help move you in that direction. So we appreciate your trust. We appreciate that you listen, that you give us feedback. And it's our prayer that you will always lead from alignment.